gears into May. Our focus is going to be on enlisted perspectives. This week, we're going to talk about the enlisted career track. Next week, we're going to do OPDs 2 and 3. I'm going to combine those because we're going to have a special event the third week of May. And then OPD 4 will be the shirt and admin SARM and a bunch of other stuff the last week of May. I think it's important to talk about this because pilots overall are kind of at a disadvantage dealing with enlisted personnel. We're kind of in our own bubble, but more so in the C5 than any other aircraft, we should be attuned to their career path and considerations for them as supervisors and as officers. So thanks to Senior DeAngelis and Senior Reinbold for popping in today to provide us with their perspectives. What I like to do for our guest speakers is have them give a little intro about you, your career path, how you got where you are, and then in your case especially, what would you say you do in the squadron? What kind of duties and responsibilities do you guys have? So I'll kick it over to you guys.
I guess I'll go since Cole's hesitating. So first, I'll just start off. Some of you guys have already heard my story, so just bear with me. I grew up in Newton, Massachusetts. Growing up, I hated anything that had to do with school. In high school, I was in a special program that monitored me going to school because I never went to school. So once I finally graduated, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with going to college, so I just worked. 9/11 happened, and I figured I need to do something more productive with my life other than just working at the airport. So in October of 2001, I went to the recruiter's office to sign up, went through the delayed enlistment program, which I didn't actually enlist until May of 2002. Signed up as a loadmaster because, like some of you I've talked to about, my best friend was a pilot, told me the only job to sign up for if you want to fly is be a loadmaster. So luckily smart enough to get on the right path to start. So joined as a loadmaster. It was a C-130 loadmaster out at Yokota for the first 6 years of my career. Again, through the airman path. Airman and NCO path, obviously starting off and perfecting my path. Growing up at Yokota, ended up being a squadron evaluator throughout my time there. Moved on, went to the FTU at Little Rock, so I taught at the FTU for a couple of years, and then moved up again to be an evaluator there at the FTU, evaluating all the instructors in the program there, and then moved up to OGV. So I was in charge of evaluating not just all the evaluators, but the squadron as a whole at the FTU. At that point in time, I moved on after there and went to the CRW, where I was a master sergeant and started leading people and moving over. So I was at the AMOS, which is a little bit different in the CRW. Most people think the CRW is opening up air bases. I was at the AMOS portion, which is more of a deployed TACC type that was here at Travis. So I did that for about 3 years, moved up to the ops superintendent position. At that point in time, I had to go back to an operational flying. I was an prior C-130 EH guy, so they retired all those for active duty, so I would have to go back through another school anyways. I wanted to do something different. So I tried to move over to a different airframe, and obviously if I'm gonna go, I might as well go big. So tried to move over to C5, got to make it happen. So moved over to the Double Deuce, went down to school obviously, and was hired on to be the superintendent as well. What does the superintendent do? Well, that's a hard question to answer sometimes, right? I always tell a lot of people, what is the job? It's the enlisted commander of the squadron. So it's just dealing with the day in and day out of everything that's going on in the squadron. And that could be anything with personnel type stuff, working with the shirt, working with the commander, moving to EPRs, moving to just taking care of people, getting involved in mission related type stuff with dealing with training and stand eval, but that more pushes down to the ops superintendent realm. But mostly it's just, like I said, it's just, I consider myself the enlisted commander of the squadron. And that's all I got.
Who's Cole?
He got scared.
Cole disappeared.
Cole gets scared very easily, guys. Be really nice to him if he joins us back.
I'm skittish.
Oh, there he is. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that you would hear that. That's so embarrassing.
What's going on?
Hey, sorry, kicked me off. Is it my turn? All right. So a little background about me. I was born in Wyoming, actually, and I moved from there. I kind of moved around, but I wasn't a military brat. My dad did project management all across the United States, doing like gas distillation, so like nitrogen, argon, oxygen, stuff like that. So we would move every 3 years, and he would build like cooling towers and stuff like that. So I've lived in Wyoming, Ohio, Chattanooga, Tennessee, right below Dallas, Texas, right near Nashville, Tennessee, and then Philadelphia, right outside of Philadelphia. And I moved to Philly in 2003, and that's right when Donovan McNabb and that fabulous Eagles team was together. So that's why I'm an Eagles fan. Just got to put that out there. And then
Didn't they lose in the Super Bowl?
I don't remember. It's been a while, a long time ago. So and then so I enlisted in 2005. I was an emergency management specialist. So up until, I don't know, about 6 months ago, well, let me start with this. So I was an emergency management specialist. So what they are is they're part of the civil engineering squadron. So we do nuclear, biological, chemical warfare things. So in that job, you deal with anthrax, sarin, nuclear radiation, that kind of stuff. So my first base, I was at Lakenheath, and I got to deploy to Baghdad, Iraq. So I was living in a bunker, one of Saddam Hussein's bunkers there in Baghdad. Got to go hit golf balls off of the palace there in Baghdad, so that was pretty cool. And I worked with the Air Force nuclear radiation team on some cool operations. So then I did 3 years of that, and I cross-trained to become a flight engineer. So like I said, up until about 6 years ago, you could only cross-train into the flight engineer career field, right? You had to come from a maintenance AFSC, or you had to get a waiver like myself to cross-train to be an engineer. So I cross-trained. I also went to C-130s. I went to EC-130s, Davis-Monthan. It's the Compass Call platform. We're an electronics and communications jamming platform. You can Google it and find out anything you want to know about it, pretty much, right? We jam all kinds of stuff on the frequency range. So you can look what we did. We've been continuously deployed since 2002 or whatnot. So I did 4 deployments there to Bagram, 1 to Kuwait. And then I got sick of deploying. I wanted to do something funner. So the C5 said that they just wanted a couple highly experienced C-130 senior NCOs. So they pulled in me and DeAngelis over to them. So here I am. And here I'm the operations superintendent. And what that kind of is for everyone is basically I work with the DO and trying to kind of wrangle stand eval training and operations to all talk to each other, because right now we have a very fluid and I think good working relationships But you'll see sometimes when communication isn't as good, like simple things like routing 4324s and the letter of X's and the training priorities meeting and all of these things that you're like, oh yeah, sure, that should just happen. They don't happen. So I kind of help out the DO and everybody else kind of get those projects running and try to break down those functional silos. So that is what I do.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully, you guys had a chance to watch my riveting video that I did. If anything, you have a good place to get some pizza this weekend. Highly encourage you supporting local business. For both you guys, whoever wants to go first, if you just want to, give us your perspective, what do you think we need to know as officers at the squadron level to help support you guys and help grow our young enlisted?
I saw you on mute, Cole. Were you ready to say something? No, so biggest thing I say, obviously, a lot of the officers I've talked to, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've seen and they've mentioned, right? They've said, I'm really not sure how I go about leading my flight. And they talk about that they just lean on the senior NCO in that flight, right? They lean on that flight chief to take care of all the enlisted matters. So when I think it was when I was in senior NCO academy, we had a major come talk to us, and he was saying throughout all of our PMEs, we're really not taught how to lead enlisted. So I asked the question, I said, well, this might be a stupid question, but if you're not taught how to lead enlisted, well, who the fuck are you leading? So I've kind of learned over the years that a lot of officers, it seems like, lean on, just like I said, lean on the senior NCO of the flight to take care of a lot of the enlisted matters. And then when the senior NCO of that flight's not taking care of those, then who is taking care of that? So like I've said before, I think the flight commander and the flight chief, flight superintendent of each flight need to run their flight just like how the squadron superintendent, or the squadron commander and squadron superintendent should run the squadron, right? Should be hand in hand together on all matters. But for an officer specifically, I would definitely say there's two things, right? You have to inspire your airmen. And how do you do that? You really have to show that you care about them, right? You have to really get to know them. A lot of the times I've heard officers, right, I've talked to some flight commanders and said, hey, how come we haven't put anybody in for this award? They said, yeah, we just got wrapped up in so much of the day-to-day business that I didn't have time to do it. Ultimately, that's affecting your airman's career. You have to learn how to prioritize what's really important, those day-to-day things that you feel like are important maybe aren't so important because you're affecting somebody's career by not taking the time out to take care of your airmen. Like I've said, and like I've told the commander before, I think we just talked about this again this past week, is there's so much going on at times that you could stay at work and be at work all day and all night and you're not going to get everything done, right? You have to realize what's truly important. If it's not affecting somebody's life, it's not affecting somebody's career, and it's not affecting the overall mission, it can probably wait till the next day. But something like taking care of awards and stuff really is affecting somebody's career. That's affecting an airman's career. But most important for officers, and it's not just flight commanders, is getting to know your enlisted. They're going to feel a lot more comfortable coming up to you and talking to you if you truly show how much of a vested interest they have or that you have in their career and them, not just their career, but their personal lives as well. I've seen it from a lot of great officers really getting to know their people and not just knowing them work-wise, but getting to know their families, right? I had one awesome commander years ago that memorized every single thing about everybody in the squadron, knew their, all their family members, knew their dogs' names, knew their birthdays. There's no way I could ever know that type of stuff. And I wouldn't expect everybody to know that. But just getting to know those small things will truly get your airmen to really know that you care about them. And I'll send it off to Cole.
What was the question? Yeah, I think that's one thing that I harp on. There is a chain of command, but two things that I'll key in on what Senior DeAngelo said was, if the flight chief is not there, right? The flight chief's on a mission. The one thing I noticed being in ops, and I'll tell this to anybody that'll listen to me, is that if I wasn't there and my flight commander wasn't there, then it was like, oh, we were on a mission, right? We were gone. It's the easiest excuse in Fred to have, right? Oh, we were all on missions. We got busy, right? So stuff just gets dropped. So I think having that good working relationship in the flights, right? If you're a captain or the lieutenant and your flight commander's gone, right? Are you stepping up to fill that role, right? Like, hey, I'm going on a mission, right? IPs, everybody knows IPs and ACs are in short supply right now. So those people, they're going to be gone a lot. One thing we do have a lot in abundance is co-pilots, right? So you guys can stick around and take care of the mission, right? But working with your senior NCOs, getting to know your senior NCOs or your NCOICs, right? Because once your flight chief is gone, the next one up for the flight chief is the NCOIC, and building that good working relationship, right? One thing I like to key in on, and one thing that I think myself, right, I am guilty of this as anybody, is a term called management by exception, right? Just to kind of go back to like basic management principles. It's like, hey, everybody does is everything good? And everybody gives a thumbs up, and that's as far as we go, right? Because we don't want to peel that onion back and find that things aren't probably as good as we think they are, right? Senior NCOs do it, right? I'm not throwing spears at just the flight commanders or the officers. So just working back, working with your flights, making sure things, you go and you talk to those people every single day to see what's going on in the flight, what people need, what's not getting taken care of, that kind of stuff.
Awesome, thanks. I don't want to hog the whole conversation here. I'd rather just moderate as things get slow. So I'm going to open it up to the crowd. What questions do you have for the seniors?
So I actually got a quick question for the seniors. So something that I've experienced, I guess, being a co-pilot in the squadron is I would consider it, the closest thing I would call it would be a experience gap. So as a lieutenant, even though so we're trained to be leaders, it's kind of hard to go up to like a master sergeant, senior master sergeant or something like that and be like, oh, I'm supposed to be this guy's leader when he has like 20 years of experience on you and you're like the brand new butter bar or the brand new silver bar that's like, oh yeah, I just started the Air Force. My experience gap is like about that much. So in that sense, so how would you expect, would you still expect a lieutenant to come up like with NCOs and like the senior NCOs and stuff like that? And I mean, like, it's always good to get to know your coworkers, and I'm not saying there's a gap in the sense to be like, oh, how's your day? How are you doing? But it's, I guess, like I said, it's just kind of hard as a brand new officer to go up to a senior NCO and be like, yeah, I'm supposed to lead in some form, when really, I mean, what ends up happening is the younger officers lean on the senior NCOs, as you guys say, at least, because it's usually what ends up happening is you guys end up teaching us a lot of things about the squadron and how the Air Force works.
So I would say, and hopefully this answers your question, I would say seek out, right? Seek out a good NCO or senior NCO, right? We've all seen those NCOs, senior NCOs that, you know, a lot of them will say senior NCO that make Master Sergeant, and then they're just happy to make Master Sergeant and retire. Uh, the Air Force has seen it over the last few years, we'll say 5 years or so, that that's not what we want. So hopefully we're getting rid of some of those or kind of phasing that type out. But we can all see that, you know, you have your high speed, high quality senior NCOs, and then you have those that just show up to work at times. So I would say seek out one of those high-speed senior NCOs. Hopefully you have one in your flight. If you don't, it's okay. That's the senior NCO's responsibility. If you had a chance to read the 362618, that's one of a senior NCO's responsibility, is to develop officers, right? CGOs. So I would say that seek out a high-speed senior NCO, and they will help direct you and guide you to where you need to go. And I think that will help obviously develop you over the years. And I've heard from, like I've said, previous officers in the past that said, hey, the first squadron I ever got to, the senior or the master sergeant grabbed me and led me through things for the first 3 months that I was there, and it truly made me into the strongest officer that I am today. So I would definitely say seek out a senior NCO. I wouldn't say that you're usually just going to have a lot of senior NCOs walking around looking for lieutenants or captains to go around and just start mentoring them. So I would say it's on you to possibly seek them out for a type of mentorship, and don't feel bad that obviously I'm an officer and I have to seek out, you know, mentorship from an enlisted. Because I think we should have to do the same thing, right? There's a lot. This is awesome that that you guys are doing this, or that we're doing this as a team, because there's so much that I've seen in the enlisted side that I have no clue about officer type stuff. And there's so much that enlisted need to learn about officers, right? I'm still learning day by day what a PRF is and all this and that. I'm like, I don't know what any of this stuff is. So I think this is awesome that you guys are doing this, because it just makes us that much better as a whole team. But again, hopefully this answers your questions, but I would just say, you know, seek out a high-speed senior NCO that can help guide you and give you that mentorship that'll help build you up over the years.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I guess like my question is, so the way I view or I treat staff sergeants and airmen based being below staff sergeant is kind of different from how I treat like a tech sergeant master. Can you guys hear me? My speaker just, hello?
Yeah, it was a little broken. Now you're muted.
Sorry, having technical difficulties on my side. But I would, like, for example, I'll approach one of the brand new FEs or usually staff and be like, how's your family? What's going on? What are you doing on the weekends? What are you like? Are you enjoying? Oh, Saturdays, I'm so broken. Okay.
I think I know what you're asking, Lieutenant Webb. Right. It's situational, right? I mean, as stupid of an answer as that is, right? Like, if you're new to the squadron, you know, like Lieutenant Webb's probably not going to walk up to Master Sergeant, you know, 20-year Master Sergeant and say, hey, Master Sergeant, we need to knock this out by the end of the day, right? Like, we all understand that, right? And nor should you be put in that position, in my opinion, right? And obviously, I'm not in charge of officers, but it's like a lieutenant, right? Normally when the flight commander leaves, you know, the senior NCO fills in, or there's another captain in the flight that's filling in, right? Very rarely, I think, do we, you know, have, I mean, it's the same for enlisted, right? Whenever that flight chief leaves or that NCOIC leaves, there's not a lot of staff sergeants running around running the flights and stuff like that. And we're purposefully built that way, right? To kind of have that repetitiveness built into our squadron. So you have to approach things different ways, right? Like you shouldn't be, right? Like that's the whole thing with leadership, and that's the whole thing with communicating with said master sergeant, tech sergeant, staff sergeant, airman, that kind of stuff, and getting comfortable with them and just using your resources, right? Like if you have a tech sergeant or a master sergeant and, you know, the flight commander left and he vested you in charge, and that person is just not doing what you want them to do, right? Then have a meeting whenever the flight commander comes back and say, hey, I was trying to get this done, but said person really wasn't helping me, right? And that's kind of how I would go about it, right? Don't, like, you know, I'm ordering you, master sergeant, you will do this kind of thing, right? It's like, that's not nurturing that relationship inside your flight or whatnot. But you do have to approach different people with different strategies.
Hey guys, so Kramer lost his internet and my video is not working today, but I'll audibly keep it rolling. Is there anything left to add on this topic before we move on to the next one? No? Sweet. Ryan, do you want to talk about the FE career plan that you sent?
Yeah. So here, I'm gonna share this. So if Colonel Kramer, can you guys see that? Do you guys look at my screen? Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Sweet. So Colonel Kramer kind of sent out the 362618. Right. There's a lot of, he talks about and if this is an eye chart, right? So if you start at the top, you got the green bubbles, and then you got the blue squares, right? Those are your wings, right? Your basic wings, your wings on your stars, and then your toilet bowl, right? That's the star in the wreath. And then underneath that, when you start hearing him talk about the 3, 5, 7, and 9 levels, so those are the purple boxes there, right? So that's as you progress in rank, you get your 5 level, you get your 7 level, and then superintendent, you get your 9 level. And if you flow below that, right, those are your ranks. So your airman, staff, all the way up to chief. And then you see below there your different PMEs, right? So ALS, that's Airman Leadership School. So that's when staff's senior airmen, in order to pin on staff sergeant, they have to go to ALS, right? And then in order to, and then at some time as you normally as a tech sergeant, you're going to go to NCOA, and then before you pin on senior master sergeant, you have to go to senior NCOA, or chief. Excuse me, chief. You have to go to senior NCOA. So those are your PMEs there in the blue: the ALS, the NCOA, and the senior NCOA. And then you got some SEJ PMEs, right? Those are just distance learning. And then below that, you got all your career path upgrades, right? So your IP, right? Your IF, your IL, your EP, your EL, and those are just all kinds of things you can do midway throughout your career, right? So career progression, promoting what we value, right? Instructor, that being an instructor about. You see it in a lot with being a staff or a tech. So then be like, we got some senior and high-speed load masters that are instructors. You see that's really not where they should be, right? But they're really, but if you look at this career field education and training of the staff and the sergeant. With that, you have DSD, developmental special duties. That is your recruiter, your trainers, so the people that are the NCO.
I think we lost another one. Well, at least we still have his, well, we had his screen up. I'll share that thing that he had. And DeAngelis, do you mind kind of like kind of describe what the difference of the Loadmaster career progression versus the FE career progression, and what we can do to help it out?
So they're actually pretty much the same. The only difference is there's a couple of differences in the timeline for upgrades. I would have to look at it again. Maybe not upgrades, but like different positions. There's differences in like a year or two, and that's mainly due to a lot of engineers, like Cole talked about, are cross trainees from previous career fields. So a lot of the Loadmasters, as you can see, majority of the Loadmasters that we have are straight from basic training, straight from tech school, right? So they haven't been in a different career field for 2-3 years prior to crossing over to be an engineer. So majority is the same. As you can see, obviously, like I've talked about previously, for C5 specific, right? Because this is just a flight engineer career path and a Loadmaster career path for all of 1 Alpha 1 and all 1 Alpha 2 airframes. But for C5 specific, right, we always talk about primary, and there's no primary listed on this career path because, again, it's a C5 specific type thing. But that should fall in between mission ready and instructor upgrade. So when we go to the EFDP, which is the Enlisted Force Development Panel, when we start talking about EPRs and who's going to get a push rating on their EPR, if we have a senior airman or a staff sergeant that's not a primary because they're not pushing for that, well, they haven't, and they're not an instructor or a primary, well, then they haven't even fulfilled their duties of their path chart to move towards being awarded any type of push, because they're not fulfilling their duties and their responsibilities. So again, that's another one. Like I said, primary is not located on here just because it's C5 specific. Some of the differences in here, DSD, and these aren't something that are a given, right? I've never done a DSD. It's not something that you have to do. It's just saying during this time period is when people should start getting pushed for those types of things, right? FTU tour, that's another difference, right? In the C5 community, we don't have an FTU for C5 specific flight engineers or Loadmasters to go down and teach at, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. We do have a COE, which is the Center of Excellence down at Lackland, which teaches the basic Loadmaster course and basic flight engineer course, as well as I forget what they call it now, Aircrew Fundamentals, which is the first course that aircrew members will go through once they graduate basic training. They go through the Aircrew Fundamentals course. So we're able to send members down to Lackland to teach at the Aircrew Fundamentals or basic flight engineer, basic Loadmaster course. But again, that is for all airframes as well. So it's at times it's hard to get any of our members down there. So that's what we're lacking in the C5, is being able to get our members experience teaching at an FTU. And that's one of the things that we've been working on, trying to push towards getting AMC to open it up and having the FTU be type of a reserve associate. So that will give our members an opportunity to teach at an FTU, because you gain so much experience, like a lot of our officer counterparts have seen. You gain so much experience teaching at an FTU. And that's about it. Like I said, there's only a couple differences in the flight engineer and Loadmaster career path, and it's just dealing with dates and times. And again, that's just due to, like I said, majority of Loadmasters come straight in being a Loadmaster, and flight engineers go 2, 3, 4 years before cross flowing over to be an engineer.
Nice. I had a question too about, so ALS and NCOA and senior NCOA selection, like how does that work? Is it just kind of a time frame thing, or do we pick people that are ready, or what?
Cole, get back up yet?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
You want to answer, or you want me to? It's all good.
No, sure. Yeah, the ALS, it's just if you have a high-speed senior airman, you can volunteer to send them Other than that, it's mandatory. So every staff sergeant and above has been through ALS. Tech sergeants, it's the Air Force is doing a lot better job now. They're trying to put people in when they think they're ready. So that list comes down, and the squadron kind of pushes, hey, you should go to NCOA. But eventually, everyone goes to NCOA. And then senior NCOA, they're actually kind of, if a senior NCO wants to defer senior NCOA and they're close to retirement, they're allowing people to do that. But it is not the same as like, oh, you're a school select, you're going to India for a year or something like that. The only thing we have that's sort of like that is we can do like inter service PME. So like as a senior NCO, you can get selected for the Army or the Marines senior NCO Academy, and that's kind of like a feather in your cap for us.
Nice. Thanks.
So I managed to get back up with the interwebs. I don't know if you guys addressed it, but I noticed we're talking about career paths here and EPRs and getting a push. If you haven't covered it already, as supervisors and officers, what are the things we value, and what behaviors can we support? What things can we push and encourage people? How can we help out with that process, getting people promoted, awards, etc.?
So we touched on it just briefly, but like again, I said, when we're looking at senior airmen and staffs, like I always say, is you have to have that foundation, and the foundation is your career field, right? So you have to be an expert. Like we've seen, if you've seen the 2618, it talks about, the airman tiers where you're starting to, to be a functional expert in your craft, or the airman tiers where you're starting to learn everything, then staff sergeant, tech sergeant, functional expert, and then moving up from there. So again, senior airmen and staff, you're looking at, we really need to be pushing our members to be, for loadmasters, being a primary, and then as well as for engineers, for staff sergeant moving up there, they're being pushed to be instructors. But again, like we've said, that most of our engineers are cross-flowing for cross-training from other career fields. So majority of them are already staffs when they get to us. So they're not going to have the opportunity to be an instructor right away. So we always look at that, right? We just had one last year. Last year for our staff sergeant EFTP, we had a student that got a push, and she was a must promote. And the given was, or pretty much everybody in the squadron felt like students will not get a push because they're a student and they're not even qualified. Well, we just always have to look and see where everybody is at in their career, right? We had another member that was an instructor, felt like he should have got a push because this member wasn't even a qualified engineer yet. Well, we always have to look and see where each member is at, right? So we look at the members' records previously to them even being a qualified student, and the records were incredible. And then while the member was going through training, all we heard was incredible things of how the student is doing. So we always have to look and see where they're at. But kind of go back to it was, if we have members, especially like loadmasters, we need to be pushing them towards being a primary, being an instructor. And it's not just for a push for an EPR, right? It's to make us better as a whole. Like I've told the loadmasters plenty of times, I don't need 90 pallet pushers and 90 people that just run locks. I need people that kick ass every day and want to improve and get better. And become primary so they can help lead the crew and lead the load team, and then become instructors so they can help develop those that are coming up behind them. So again, I think the foundation is obviously is pretty much kicking ass at your job, and that's being a primary, being an instructor, being an evaluator. And then again, it just goes off of different ranks, right? And then for airmen, you're just expecting them, like we said, is continuing to perform their craft as an engineer or loadmaster. and being a great follower. Now, once you start moving up to staff and tech sergeant, that's when you have to start showing a little bit smaller leadership traits, and that could be smaller possible involvement in group type activities, right? Because we talk about, especially like I've told a lot of people when they go to Stanival or whatever, you're not really leading people, you're just managing programs. So how do you show that leadership type stuff? That might be you have to step outside the squadron and show leadership. Or there's plenty of other opportunities within the squadron that you can show leadership opportunities. And then once you move to senior NCO, now you have to really start stepping out, and we have to push our members to start leading bigger projects and showing that leadership, right? When it gets to the board and for recommendations and they look at it, well, great. Everybody's, if you're a master sergeant or above, if you've been doing the job pretty much your whole career, you should be an instructor, if not an evaluator. So everybody's at that point. Well, what are you doing above that that's showing all your leadership? I'll push it to Cole.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to echo everything Seabass just said, but everything he said, it's spot on. You know, I'm sure everybody knows there's no, we're not checking boxes, we're not doing formulas, but there's things that we're looking for, right? Are you doing them for the right reasons, right? Are you chasing awards because you're chasing awards, right? Do you step on people to get where you're going, that kind of thing? Are you out for yourself, right? So those are things that we're looking for during the EFDPs. You know, as I saw in the chief pilot's newly minted office, humble, approachable, credible, right? The weapons school motto. So I think those are things that I like to look for with people and what we like to talk about during the EFDP. And yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome, thanks. Open up for more questions. Anyone in the crowd?
Yeah, I've got one. For people who are already flight commanders or people who I'm sure everyone at some point during their career is going to be a flight commander. Along the same lines as you guys were just discussing, how can we like get people to where they want to go, whether it's promotion, special duty assignments, or things like that? Like, what should we be encouraging them to do outside of, just excelling in their jobs, that sort of thing?
So you need to, if people want to do stuff, right, the DSD, it comes out every 6 months, right? So if people want to get DSD'd, just bring that up to senior leadership, right? And that's how people get DSD'd. So that is the actual process. Like so-and-so, they want to go be TI, right? They want to go be a first sergeant, that kind of stuff. And then, we route that up the chain. Promotion wise, a records review. So if somebody is wanting to get promoted, they want to know what they can do to help their chances for promotion. A records review, you can send them to Sergeant DeAngelis or myself, and we can take a look at their records. Hopefully their flight chiefs are doing that kind of stuff. So, but if you feel like that they're missing the mark on those things, then we're always available to look at those records. So that's pretty much the two ways, right? It's you got to meet certain marks as far as career progression, and then once you step outside of your career, you got to look at can the squadron afford to move these people? How long have they been on station? As far as those things, to moving people outside of the career. That's it from me.
Yeah, Cole hit it. I mean, it's not just DSD, which is a developmental special duty, but it's just stepping out, right? I've seen it so much when I came over to the C5. The C5 is just a different beast, right? Because we only have 2 active bases. And we don't really PCS many flight engineers and loadmasters coast to coast. So I've seen a lot that members that have been here for 10, 12 years. So they have a very small scope of the Air Force as a whole. So they know what an engineer, they know what a loadmaster, and they know what a pilot do in the 22nd Airlift Squadron at Travis Air Force Base, but they don't have any idea of anything else in the Air Force. So it's sometimes getting them out to do something different, right? And we have the CRW, which is on base here. So even people can stay here on base, right? If they want to stay at Travis, and you just go over to the CRW and learn something totally different. But as a whole, it's just getting people to understand that you have to learn something different, right? Because some people just get so comfortable doing what they're doing, right? They can work in readiness and they're just, well, I'm comfortable. I know the process is here, right? In readiness. Well, it's moving on and learning something different. And it's not something that they need to do every 6 months or every year. Usually we shoot for about a 2-year time period. So it gives that type of comfortability to stay within the squadron and learn those processes, but then move on to another flight, a new avenue to learn something different. But again, if for flight commanders, I would say you tie in with your flight chief, flight superintendent, and sit down with those members and find out what their intentions are, right? I always tell all the loadmasters in CT, you have to let me know your intentions. Because if an assignment or whatever drops down and I don't know you want to do this, then I'm not going to put your name in for anything because I don't know you want to do this, right? We had a member that got picked up for a DSD, which was a local hire on base, teaching PME, teaching ALS. And it just happened to be because I caught him in the hallway and jokingly mentioned it to him. But it was something that he was interested in doing. So you always have to seek out and talk to your flight members what their intentions are, right? Because you can't help them if you don't really know what their intentions are. But again, I would just say you sit down with your flight chiefs and you sit down with your members. And just like Cole said, you can push up records to us. If you ever have any questions, you push up records to us because I love sitting down and reviewing people's records and giving feedback and letting them know where we can improve on.
So I just want to ask a practical question. Say we have a high-speed individual, or let's say we have a high-drag individual, one way or the other, and we want to talk about how to either properly mentor and motivate or how to give them a nudge along. Is this something where we would talk to you or Senior Reinbold, or would we engage more with a flight chief or an RM? Like who are the right belly buttons when we're looking to develop people?
Sorry, my dog walked in and distracted me for a second. Can you just repeat real quick?
Whether it's a positive or negative discipline or mentorship, who would be the belly button that we would go to, practically speaking? Would it be more the RMs or more one of the superintendents?
Oh, 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 oh. I think my favorite answer, it's situational, right? So if somebody's high speed and they're doing good work, you know, highlighting them, and there's no wrong medium, right? We talk about awards, right? Like, oh, this person killed it, so I'm gonna wait 3 months and put them in for a quarterly package, right? If they're doing really, really good work, we talk about feedback, right? It's initial, midterm, and then your performance report. But feedback it's a daily process. So if they're doing good, let them know they're doing good. Highlight that to flight leadership. Let the RMs know. I love to hear that stuff, right? Because that's, like, just like if you guys are managing flights of 50 people, 20 people, 10 people, you probably don't know them all personally. we don't know everybody personally. So if people are crushing it on a daily basis, just saying, hey, shooting an email, this person's doing X, Y, Z. We feel like they should get recognized or whatever, right? That's Colonel Trumbull's, heavy hitter awards, the Muley all call. I'm sure you've seen Senior DeAngelis bring people up on stage and just say, hey, these people are absolutely crushing it, right? That's that just like recognition. It's not an Airman of the Quarter, an NCO of the Quarter, but it's still like, hey, this squadron is kicking ass, and we want to recognize that, whether it be at an all call, an email, an award, whatever. And then I'll let the bad news go over to DeAngelo.
Yeah, so bad news one. Again, same thing like Cole said, it could be situationally dependent, right? We want to keep things at the lowest level and be able to handle things at the lowest level. So majority of it, I would say you would run through the flight engineer, loadmaster leadership, just if it was low level type stuff of just getting a quick vector guidance on how to handle this type of situation. But again, I have no problem with any type of information being brought into my office, and you need to ask a question to myself or Sergeant Reinbold. I know he's the same way. But then again, if you feel like it's something that's heavy hitting enough that needs to be pushed up, then obviously you just walk right into our office and bring it up to us. But again, I think it's just situationally dependent. But most of it could possibly be, routed down through the flight engineer or loadmaster leadership. Mainly, so they're aware of things, right? There's a lot of, sometimes we hear there's a lot of communication that's being held from them, or they're just not getting word about it. So sometimes it could be nice to just run it through them, and then they could just be like, yeah, let's go talk to the superintendent and get this handled, or whatever it could be.
And I'll piggyback on that, right? I've talked to a few, pilots on the road and all that kind of stuff, right? The RM position, right? Everybody's like, what's the RM position? When I first got here, I was like, what is the RM position, right? They are the chief engineer, the chief loadmaster, right? Like your guys' chief pilot. But like, let's say somebody's out on the road and, they may be doing dumb stuff in the airplane, right? I was out on the road and this person wasn't, they were sleeping during touch and goes, or this person was very rude to ATOC when ATOC came out to the jet, or they showed up late to alert, right? And then maybe in the office, right, the flights, something's going on in the flights, right? Well, the RM is kind of the person that is consolidating this information, right? So they're the ones that kind of have the broader picture of what's going on the road, what's going on in the flights, what's going on, right? Because if not, you may only hear one side of the story. So that's where, the flight's talking to the RMs, and then the RM's talking to the flights like, oh yeah, this is what's going on with this person out on missions too, right? And it's starting to build the whole picture of maybe what's going on with that individual.
Great, thanks. Any more questions? Young folks, old folks?
Yep, I've got a question. So we've spent a lot of time talking about our top 10% of our enlisted folks and our bottom 10% of our enlisted folks. And the way I see that is you got your 80-20 rule. You spend 80% of your time on 20% of your people. Just for our senior enlisted leadership, what's your recommendations for how we spend the other 20%? Because the majority of our folks are going to be somewhere between our absolute top performers that we're pushing for the heavy hitters and our absolute bottom performers that we're seeking ways to improve on. So just what do you think is the best way to maximize the amount of time and energy we give to the majority of our folks?
Man, I don't know how do you maximize the time. The one I would say, right? Because we all know we have superstars that we don't really need to invest a whole lot of time into, which, I mean, we definitely need to invest our time into them, but we can see that they're handling their stuff. So we don't need to push them as much, right? And then we have the I don't know how do you want to say it, the bottom feeders, that we end up spending a lot more time than needed on at times. But then you have the middle of the pack, right? And it's okay to have some of those that are at the middle of the pack, right? I need to have a staff sergeant that's 15 years that's just crushing it as a loadmaster, as an engineer, right? He's not going to be a squadron superintendent one day, and not everybody's going to be in their whole career, right? We just have to be able to see. And again, it's just talking to our members and seeing what their intentions are for their career. There are those that want to retire as a staff sergeant, want to retire as a tech sergeant, and don't really want a whole lot more. But we still have to push them and get them to understand, to be a team member, you still have to participate and help each other out. Yeah, you might not want to be a flight chief one day, and you might not want to be an evaluator and move into Stanavel. But again, we still have to use our time to still push those to contribute to the team as a whole, and get them to understand that it's not just about them and their career, that they have to take care of each other. And again, it doesn't have to be, yeah, I need to strive to get that must promote or promote now, or to get that next stripe, because might not be what's driving them. We just got to figure out what is driving them. And again, that's just all about communicating with your flight members and getting them to understand. Hopefully that answered some of your question.
Yeah, mostly I'm just looking for, like, so we're not pushing them for awards, and we're not pushing them to try and get, early promotions and all the rest of that stuff, but there are still things that we can do to help take care of those people. And I don't want to look at my 15-year staff sergeant and say, well, I'm not pushing you for a tech sergeant or a master sergeant, so I'm not going to help you out at all. I still want to take care of those people, and I still want to look after them and try and get them assignments they want, or jobs that they want to be in, where they can really contribute and just maximize, like you said, maximize that willingness to work for the team, and their effort that they're able and willing to put in.
I think, like Senior DeAngelis said, right, you have to talk to those individuals. So if you have individuals that are like, hey man, what are your goals? What do you want to do with your career? Do you want to stay in? Do you want to get out? Right. You may have some individuals that are like, I want to be a line flyer. I want to retire as a staff sergeant, and that's all I want to do. Right. And as long as those individuals are taking care of their currencies, they're showing up on time, they're passing their PT test, right? There's a place in the Air Force for those individuals. If an assignment comes down and they want to go be an MTI, or they want to get DSD'd, or they want to go to Dover or something along those lines, and they're showing up on time, and they're flying the line, and as a staff sergeant with 1,500 hours or 2,000 hours, I think you should be an instructor, right? So that's maybe something like you need to be like, hey man, you're good with all this stuff. We just need you to hit this level, right? Because as an NCO, you should be, your career progression, going back to that eye chart I put out, you should be here, right? So setting those expectations for those people needs to be there. And like Sean DeAngelo said, not everybody wants to be a master sergeant. So you can try, you can more than, and you got to push people. You got to push people into being uncomfortable. But like I use the term, I've gotten to this discussion with people. Not everybody wants to be a group commander, right? Not everybody wants to be a squadron commander. So you could apply the same concept to a staff sergeant going to master sergeant, right? Like, they don't want to be a flight chief. They don't want to review 30 EPRs every year. They're just happy flying the line. So talking to those individuals and talking to those people and and setting those expectations and having them meet those expectations is something that you just have to do on an individual and flight basis.
All right, we got time for one more from the crowd. We'll find someone on the younger side. Waverly, what's been on your mind? Got any questions for the seniors?
Can you guys hear me? Okay. I'm trying to think of a question in terms of leading enlisted people. I don't know, Translite's been really good in terms of element exposure. We have like our weekly Zoom meeting, and then I'll go ahead and make individual calls to each person in my element. I can't say I have a question. I'll say they're totally right with knowing your people. The first week I like called people in my element and checked up on them. I like made notes of what they said, like a little sticky note on my laptop. And then the next time I called them, it meant a lot. I could tell it meant a lot to like say something very specific, like, hey, how's it going with editing all those nature pics? Or like, how is your wife doing? And like calling them by name and just small things like that. So I'm very forgetful, so I have to write it down. But yeah, that wasn't a question. I'm trying to think of one. I don't think I have one right now.
No, that's all right. No pressure. And that's a good tip for people. Oh, go ahead,
I
Senior.
was just gonna say that point is awesome, right? I still remember, and I tell people this story all the time. I still remember my first squadron superintendent, Chief Master Sergeant Rick Day. He was one of those types that I mentioned earlier that could remember everything about everybody. And I always said to myself, I will never be that way, and I don't know how people are that way. But I've realized over the years, if you care enough about your people, it makes it that much easier to remember those things and not just let it go through one ear and out the other. Because I remember how important it was for somebody to remember such a small detail about my life, how important it was, and made me feel good at the end of the day. So I've realized over the years, like was mentioned, that if you truly care about your people, it's that much easier to remember those things, right? I used to always think I was the same way, that I'm just gonna have to write everything down on a sticky note, have my notepad, and just write everything down while everybody's talking to me. But once you really care about your people and show that you care about your people, it makes it that much easier to remember those things. A little bit difficult at times when you have 230 people in a squadron, but again, you really can touch people's heart when you remember those things and mention things back to them. They truly do appreciate it. And again, you're not going to be able to touch everybody. There's some people that'll just blow you off and walk by and not really care. But as long as you've touched one person, you've done your job.
I just have one final question. I was just kind of reminiscing here back when I was in this very same squadron about 10 years ago. I remember a young Dunning, Hendricks, Joel Juarez. I think people don't realize you guys can stick around for a while and you see people come and go. So when based on all your experience and seeing all these young pilots become old pilots and officers, what values and traits have you guys seen that we can shoot for that have led to successful careers in the officer world?
I think being a good officer in the C5 squadron is twofold. You know, kicking ass on the road, being a good aircraft commander, and leading your people, right? Taking care of your people, the office, and taking care of your people on the road, I think are one and the same, right? Because if you show that you take care of your people as an aircraft commander, right? Like, hey, you know, like, how's everybody doing? Checking in on your people, maybe buying a box of donuts and throwing them on the galley. You know, hey, I got you guys, the plug for me, I got you guys a few extra hours off in Rota or something like that. So, you know, doing those things to help people out. Just those little things, kind of like Lieutenant Hawk said, right? Just writing things down. Just those little things to show people that you're trying, right? You're trying to take care of the crew as the AC or maybe a co-pilot. You're trying to take care of people in your flight by like, hey, what's going on? What do you need? You know, those how are you doing, those conversations, those meaningful conversations that you have where you ask about the nature pics or somebody's family. How's the new baby doing? Are you getting enough sleep? Things like that, right? Because when you show people that you care about them, then they'll start caring about you, and everybody will want to work together, and it makes you know, like as Colonel Pollock says, it makes the Muley family stronger when everybody is caring about everybody and everybody's working together as a cohesive unit versus everybody's out for themselves. We're just here to get the mission done. I'm just here to meet these tasks and these deadlines, and I'll see you guys later, right? Then it's like, cool, sounds good. So those are things that I've seen in some of the most effective officers that I've worked for.
Yeah, so the same thing. Obviously, like most of you guys have known, my number one word that I use is care, right? You have to truly care for your people. And just like we talked about, that's as an AC or as a pilot, as well as in the office as an officer, right? On the road, you have to care for your people. Number one, it's the same thing like we've talked about for our enlisted members. You have to have that foundation of kicking ass at your job, you know, being an awesome pilot, first and foremost. And then holding each other accountable, holding enlisted counterparts accountable, being professional. And then obviously in the office, the same thing goes along with all that. But then being an officer, right? Being a true officer, not just a pilot, but living by those values of being an officer. But again, mainly is just showing people how much you care, right? I've used that quote before that, you know, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, is truly, truly important. And like we've talked about, those small things matter so much. But as long as you're trying to get better each and every day, and learning, it is the most important. And again, like I said, it's just the foundation of being a kick-ass pilot as well as a kick-ass officer. But yeah, truly just caring for your people and taking care of everybody is the most important.
Copy that. I appreciate it. We're a little over time. I don't want to keep you guys on the hook all day. I still have a huge list of questions, but we can address them later on. I'm going to open up one more for reattacks for the seniors. If anybody has anything burning. If not, I just want to say thank you guys so much for coming in. We appreciate your perspective and hoping to learn a lot more on these topics as we work through the month. I think the officers are going to hang back for a few minutes. We had a couple questions about our VML, and I know the boss has some words on that. So before you two go, I'm going to kick it over to the boss, and thanks for showing up.
What's up, team? Good time to grab it.
Hey, sir, Asper here. Do you want me to record this stuff, or should I pause it?
No, you can record this. This is
Okay.
this is my mistakes as a leader in the C5 community that I think will help you be a better officer when leading enlisted. Okay, number one. So I wrote this down while we were talking. And credibility and care has come up a couple times. And I remember very early on being told, hey, to get credible, you have to be a good pilot and a co-pilot, right? And you focus very much on becoming a great aviator right away. But I think what's lost in that is you have to care, and this kind of surfaced over and over. So I want all the co-pilots to kind of grab onto this, first pilots, ACs. That care transcends everything, right? You can be the best damn pilot, but if you're arrogant and you don't care about your crew, they're damn well going to be talking about you as officers. You have got to know that. So part of credibility means you have to care. Yes, on the road, get the donuts, Go down, push cargo, check in, get to know them. Don't just close the door in the bunk and watch Netflix. Go back to troop and talk, right? That is what credibility you'll get. If you do that right away, and then you got to care in the office too. And I'll get to this point in a second, right? You really have to care about their career. All right, so that's point one. You know, Ryan Bull at the beginning, I laughed because I wrote down no functional silos. And that's exactly right. You as pilots, you can get in this perception that, hey, I just have to be a good pilot and not worry about the enlisted until I'm a field grade officer. Wrong. That we tend to do that, but that's not the right answer. And look at what transition flight is starting to do. I mean, they are caring and they are leading from the get-go. So that your credibility, the mastery of your craft, you have to care in that. So that's point one, right? Unless you're a subpar officer, I wrote this down, you have the capacity to care, right? Unless you're well below average, I'm thinking you guys have the bandwidth. So that's point one. Number two, find a mentor that is an NCO or senior NCO. We talk a lot about mentorship, and I think we default to officers like, hey, I need to find some major, lieutenant colonel to be my mentor. That's true, but all of you should have an NCO or senior NCO mentor. And I encourage that early on. Find that NCO that you mesh with, that you have that kind of connection with, and get mentorship from them because they have a totally different perspective. And put that in your bag of tricks, right? My third point is perspective. Realize that no matter how close of a team we are, there's always going to be differences in perspective between officers and enlisted. You have got to always remember that. And this is where empathy is key, right? The very first lesson. Empathy is putting yourself in their shoes, right? So if you don't have that empathy, you're going to mislead, you're going to have kind of mismatched perspectives. Why is this important? In the DOCs, you guys probably don't know this, there are several comments that say the officers only care about themselves, right? That's a painful statement to hear from our enlisted members, that there's a perception, true or untrue, that the officers don't care about the enlisted. They just care about their careers, right? So I don't believe that to be true, but there may be a perception. So that's what I'm saying is be aware of that, be self-aware, and put that in your toolbox next time you're at cruise and the conversation that you're having. You got to shift that perspective. Number 4, write well. Write well, right? Read, write, run, reflect. They talk about that. Write EPR as well. I think Heather asked the question, what can we do to make sure that we're taking care of our enlisted? Having been in the seat now and gone through FTPs, gone to the AFPC Commander's course, seeing how promotion board works for the enlisted, and then sitting in a wing level FDP with fellow squadron commanders, the record speaks for itself. All day long, we can talk intangibles in an FDP, but when it goes to AFPC, it's a statutory board. They're not allowed to talk, and it's the record. It's how well you write that EPR for your teammate. If you blow off their EPR or you blow off that award because you're busy or prioritize, that's going to hurt their career. And that's what we're talking about. So write. Here's some tips, right? Scope of responsibility. Nail their scope of responsibility. If they're a leader in transition flight, as the tech sergeant, they're leading 80 plus enlisted. That's a big deal. Don't miss that point. Leadership, breadth of experience. Hone in on what they've done in the squadron. That breadth of experience has got to come out. How are they improving themselves? If you have a little touch of, hey, they're a self-starter and they're improving themselves in that EPR, right? Those are all important things that you have to capture. And my 5th point, when in doubt, find an E8. I will tell you, and I'm not BSing here. I spent a lot of time in OSS, and I learned the most about leadership, not from other officers, but from senior master sergeants. Right? Chiefs tend to be like colonels. They've had a lobotomy already, or they're just worried about higher pressures. E8s are still grounded to the team, but they've made that cut, and they've got that experience, and they're built on that experience. So when in doubt, when you are in an incredibly tough scenario, and I'm not just saying Johnny failed his PT test, should I go find a senior? You probably know what to do. But if there's a real situation, I will tell you that I phone my E8s all the time, right? So I would encourage you guys throughout your careers as officers to find seniors and exploit their knowledge, their effectiveness, and mission accomplishment. Sorry, that was long-winded, but I care a whole lot about the enlisted Corps because they're the majority of our team, 2/3, right? And if you are just walking through this saying I'm an officer and I'm just worried about pilot shit, you're ignoring 2/3 of our team, and they will pick up on that, right? I'm not saying that occurs, but I just kind of want to light that fire to say, hey, this is what the enlisted officer perspective means going forward. All right, questions on that? All right, I'll end by saying thanks to our guest speakers. They were phenomenal. You guys nailed it. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your insight. I appreciate it very much. Cosmo, thanks for putting all this together. Chef Asper, if you're out there without a camera, get your camera fixed. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, sir.
You guys are going to get a lot more foot traffic now that the boss put you on blast. We're going to be looking for E8s left and right. Sir, yeah, like we talked about on Slack, we had that question about the VML. Just an update on for the people who are on the list, and how that process works and how their desires get up channeled.
Yeah, you bet. So VML, vulnerability to move list. If I'm not mistaken, it's as soon as you reach 3 years time on station, boom, a list gets populated at AFPC, and it's just a list that says you're vulnerable to move, right? It doesn't mean you're getting an assignment. So that's step one, is don't panic. Step two, and I sent out an email so hopefully you guys checked your email. I sent out an email on the day the VML opened for the winter cycle. And in there I said, please come see me if you have questions, right? So my expectation is the second you're on the VML, you should come and schedule an appointment with the commander through Christina, and we will talk about your assignment preferences. Hopefully you're talking to the chief pilot this whole time about your assignment preferences. And chances are I already know your assignment preferences because we'll talk about them well in advance, right? This is not in the Double Deuce, we have an ongoing iterative conversation about assignments. So this should not be a one-off, but formally it gives you the opportunity to, hey, let's get on the commander's calendar. I am on the VML. Let's have a quick 30-minute discussion. Bring your ribbon chart. The chief pilot painstakingly puts together and tell us your preferences, right? Right now, I think we're only going to move 1 or 2 folks off this VML. We have probably like 19 folks on the VML, right? Just as an example. How does that work? So every Tuesday, I have a call with AFPC, Tuesday morning, and me and the commander Dover and our assignments officer, and we go through every officer on the VML, and we just talk about you guys and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. These are assignment options. Questions? What other questions do you have?
Got unfettered access to the commander, and there's no questions out there. Let's see. Does being reclamaed make you immune?
For the most part. For the most part. If you're reclamaed, unless there is an extraordinary circumstance, you're not going to get touched. Right? I mean, I guess one of those, you can be reclamaed, and then you could apply for a program and say, I really want to do this, and we could unreclama you, that type of thing, right? But chances are, reclama, basically what that means is you've been on the VML, right? So we get this list of, let's just use 22 people because I like that number. So we have 22 people on the VML, right? And I reclama 10 of them, or I reclama 15 of them. The rest are eligible to move. Those who have been reclamaed are no longer on the final VML, right? There's like a draft version in the final VML. So once you're reclamaed, essentially you're good to go to the next assignment cycle. What else? Baby C5.
Hey, sir. Sorry.
4 years. 4 years for the baby C5 is a going rate, right? That's what you should expect to be on station. Go ahead, Dave.
Hey, sir, quick question. So when we're inside our VML cycle, how long do we stay? Is that like a recurring thing? Like every other cycle we'll get put up for a conversation with you and the FPC, or does that go away? Like how does that work?
True. Yeah. Once you're on the VML, you're gonna stay on the VML basically, and I would say every 6 months, unless your assignment, if you sit down with the boss once and say, hey, these are my hopes and dreams, and this is an important conversation for the commander, right? I want to, before I forget, people are like, oh, she is super busy, I don't want to bother him. Wrong. This is absolutely what we love to do. Like getting you guys the assignments and making sure that you and your families are taken care of and that we're fighting. And I like to work assignments about a year out, right? So if you just hit the VML at 3 years, we start that conversation by your 4th year and maybe more. That is the sweet spot that I'll try to get you. If you want a T1 advance, that's where I say, hey, are there any T1s advance? Okay, nope, then we're not giving him a T1 advance. There is now, great, he's got his assignment. Those are the type of conversations that happen. But yes, to answer your question, once you're on the VML, because your time on station is only growing. So as they do that data pull, you're going to get pulled every time. Right? 5 years. I mean, we've got some people on the VML who've been here 5 years, right? So that just is an example. And that's why you have a longer list. You don't want to just have 2 people because then those 2 get pigeonholed into whatever drops. The bigger the list, so don't panic, the more we can kind of go find the assignment that you're seeking. If you want to go coast to coast, that is pretty much a gentleman's agreement between the 2 coasts, right? We do a quick bro check and then we coast to coast. Typically, we like to send instructor pilots, but it's not a hard fast. We can definitely send ACs with a plan, right? That's kind of how coast to coast. And then the other assignments, like there's all the Phoenix. I really encourage you guys to look hard at the Phoenix. There's Phoenix 89th now. There's Phoenix UPT, right? So it's the best of both worlds because it keeps you flying, but it gives you more opportunities to keep more doors open, right? So those are things to consider. Other questions?
All right, if there's no other questions, I'm going to hang out for a bit if anybody wants to chime in. I'm just going to make a couple plugs. First, got to meet our casuals this week. They are super motivated to learn and stuff. So if you have any recent UPT experience or have some knowledge about ground training, things like that, I'd like to put together something as kind of like a primer leading into UPT. I mean, we don't have to teach them everything, but just some general, here's how the 202 works. Let's get you some boldface ops limits, things like that. So if we got any FAPEs, recent experience from UPT or AETC, I'm going to make Jeff Asper the point man for this. So please get with him. Let's start putting some products and some ideas and a kind of syllabus together. I'd like to get moving on that. Secondly, thanks for popping in this week. Hopefully the video was relatively entertaining for being the breakdown of a Air Force handbook. So next week, I'm going to combine Loadmaster and engineer perspectives. I'm going to try to bring in Joel Juarez and Miko Morales if they're available, but I'm going to try to get some instructor evaluator types, and we're kind of going to have a continuation of this discussion. For next week's video, it's going to be more about building rapport and defensive mechanisms, because we deal with students, and it's going to help us with with some of our self-awareness. So it's going to be a little psychological on the video, and then a little practical application when we get to the live version. Like I said, the third week is going to be a special event, and then the final week is going to be the first sergeant. I asked Lindsay Fry to talk about the admin world a little bit, and I'd like to bring one of our SARMIs in to kind of talk about their career path and just kind of wrap up the month there. Leading into June, please pass me your feedback for things you would like to hear about. Some materials I got working, things are starting to percolate. The DAF career development briefs, we could talk about that. Feedback, mentorship, how to or how to be, how to get one. and some writing tips. So all this stuff is kind of coming together. So I see kind of how June is shaping up. But if you have a particular bailiwick that you're good at and want to speak to, please let me know. We'll get you in as a speaker, or if you have feedback or ideas, please pass them along. That was a lot of talking. So that's all I got. I'm going to hang out here if anybody wants to BS. But other than that, thanks for showing up. Thanks for all you do. And you're awesome.
Hey, Constable, I'd like to do a final reflection. Did we nail a date for that?
Oh, you just blew my surprise. You're that special speaker.
Shit, sorry.
No, it's good. So that third week, the boss is going to do his final reflection and 2-week look back, or 2-year look back. So that Wednesday, the video I'm going to do is on the benefits and kind of how-to of reflection and self-analysis. And then either on the 21st or 22nd, the boss is going to do a non-recorded, just chatting with the O's about the last 2 years and his lessons learned. So get up for that.
It'll be off the record because it's going to be real. So I highly encourage you to attend. We'll probably do it in the afternoon because I plan on smoking a cigar during that session and just kind of kicking back and reflecting over the last 2 years and how awesome they have been and the ups and downs of the last 2 years. So I encourage you guys to make it if you can.
If anybody ever wants to say something off the record, just say pause recording and I'll pause it. It's super easy. So don't feel threatened by the recordings.
Dover's going to get their hands on these and be making fun of us.
They're going to need to step up their game, in other words.
We haven't had any spies in a while. They just go to the YouTube